time for a Sonic Stadium interview. And here's your host, Brad Flick.
What's happening, Sonic fans? This is Brad Flick of the Sonic Stadium. And today we have Mike Pollock, the voice of Dr. Eggman, here to talk to us. Welcome to the Sonic Stadium, Mike.
Thanks so much to be here.
Mike has been the announcer of AC/DC's Black Ice album, the voice of Burger King commercials, and the former voice of the Foxbox Saturday morning block of cartoons. At 4 Kids, he's had a brief stint as the Pokemon narrator, Meat from Ultimate Muscle, and Mayor Blustergas from Kirby Right Back At Ya. You can see his full resume and credits at itsamike.com, ITSAMIKE.com. Mike, I gotta say your resume website is pretty hilarious.
Yeah, it does the job. I have fun making it.
Now, were you really Times Person of the Year?
There's actually a cool website every year at the end of the year. You can go to impoy.com, as in I am person of the year, but with the letters I am and then POY. And you can upload your photo and it'll get flashed on a billboard in Times Square for about 8 seconds, and then they'll get a webcam shot of it and send it to you. And that was mine from a couple years back.
That's pretty cool. Have you tried to get up more than once?
This year I actually didn't make the cut, and I think I got in a little too late, or else after the folks at the photo stamps thing where people were uploading black and white photos of serial killers and stuff, and they said, well, we can't have any black and white shots. So I did not make the cut this year.
Because your headshot is black and white. Well, I guess as are most actors' headshots. But anyway, let's get the ball rolling with Sonic Unleashed, the last Sonic game that you worked on. When did you start the game, and how long did it take for you to finish?
My involvement in the games tends to be really quick. It was, as I recall, early to mid last year. They just called me up and said, hey, we're recording this weekend. Can you come in on Saturday or Sunday? And I came in for a couple hours one day, and I was in and I was out.
That time sounds about right. What is a typical voice acting session for you?
For the process is a little different from doing a fully animated series versus doing a game. When you go in for a cartoon, you'll see a script. You won't usually see it in advance. In rare circumstances, you'll see a script in advance and get a chance to read it. But usually you go in and you have the director there to make sure that you're doing the right thing. And you'll see a complete script with all the lines, but you'll be skipping. Basically, we record, especially when we're dubbing something from another language into English, we're recording individually. So we just go from line to line to line, and you don't get a whole lot of the context other than the director giving you a brief synopsis at the top, and then maybe before each new scene, oh, and here's what's happening here, and here's what just happened that you missed because you're not in that scene. And then you just go through your lines, and it seems to make sense. With a game, you usually get not so much a script, but a spreadsheet with all of your lines just next to each other. You don't even see anyone else's responses generally, and you kind of have to figure out how the lines go together, and you're relying a lot on the director for knowing how the entire game works as a whole. And then you just say the lines and try to make them work as best as possible. Mm-hmm. And I find games a little bit more challenging because of that, because you don't get, not that you get a lot of a linear flow from doing a cartoon, but from doing the game, it's very compartmentalized.
So what you're saying is, for a game, the director fills you in on your character's motivation, subtext, and the context of the situation, and he also fills you on the other characters, as opposed to the show where you might be able to play off the performances of the other cast members.
Yeah, you get a lot more to work with the cartoons, especially if you're dubbing something, you've got something on the screen to watch, and depending on where you are in the dubbing process, if people have recorded their lines before you come in, then you'll have them to work off, at least a recording of them to work off. Otherwise, you're just reading cues and imagining the lines in your head, and then just putting your lines where they belong.
All right. Sonic Unleashed, what was your favorite part of working on this game?
It was the movie sequences were fun because there was a little more of a linear storyline that I could follow, and some fun little slapstick bits that were nice. So yeah, the games are steadily improved. So I would say that each game becomes a favorite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it showed because the presentational value, especially in those cutscenes, are just amazing in Sonic Unleashed. So you've done a lot of these games and a lot of these shows. Is there any experience when doing these games or the show that has just stuck in your mind since?
They all tend to be fun because usually if I'm stuck in a room for anywhere from half an hour to 2 hours, I'm going to start getting wacky because it's the only way I can keep myself from going insane from being trapped in a room. So there just usually little outtakes happen that are either shareable or not, depending on what actually gets said.
Of course.
I just have fun just walking in and just leaving my my street clothes and cares and woes behind. Not that I'm actually changing costume, but mentally I'm changing costume into someone else. And it's just nice to be someone else for an hour or two.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to being that person for a few hours, let's take Dr. Eggman, for example. Was it instantaneous as to what he was going to sound like, or did you have to do some research on the character in order to develop that voice that you use today?
As far as building the actual voice, it was I was given samples of some Dean Bristow material just to say, we want him to kind of sound like this. So I said, okay, it kind of will sound like this. And then when I eventually started recording, the character just became my own, which is a pretty natural process. And you'll notice in many cartoons that, for example, the early Simpsons characters, many of the characters sound quite different from what they sound like now, just because it takes the voice just ends up gelling, and then the actor will say, oh, okay, it feels comfortable here. So forget the stuff I did for that first season that sounds nothing like this season. Here's how it's going to sound now.
Mm-hmm.
But Eggman is like, okay, yeah, villain. This is okay. We start with the stock villain mentality. And then we, as the series progresses, oh, he does this now, and then he does this now, and then, oh, there's room for some humor here, and okay, good. So yeah, eventually, after about 5 or 6 episodes, I would say the voice solidifies and pretty much stays constant from there. But yeah, there is a little acclimatization process. Well, listen to me with my big words. But after a while, it will settle in. But it does take a few episodes at least.
Mm-hmm. And how did you get the job as Dr. Eggman in the first place? Were you a part of the 4Kids Network already, and they said, oh, well, let's use Mike? Or did you audition and just get the part that way?
I'm an independent contractor at 4Kids, as are most of the actors there, and we just work for lots of different people, including 4Kids, and we freelance there. And I had got my first 4Kid gig was for an episode of Pokemon back in 2001, I guess. And it was just a bit part, and it's like, hey, great, a Pokemon episode, and it came and went, and that was that. And then they started up the Fox Box back in the fall of, actually, no, it would be about the spring of it was actually, the Fox Box started September 2002. Mm-hmm. And the first shows that they were working on there, I guess, started recording earlier in 2002. And they had already had me on board for Kirby and Fighting Foodons, a couple of bit parts, and then Ultimate Muscle was my big breakout role at 4Kids. And when Sonic X came along, it ended up being the longest audition process I have ever gone through, stretching literally over more than a month, which is highly unusual. But they were apparently the producers of the show, the 4Kids producers, really wanted me, from what I understood, and they were trying to convince Sega that Sega really wanted me. So they kept bringing me back for callback after callback after callback, saying, here, now do it this way, try it again, come on, we really want you to get this. So it dragged on for a while, but eventually I literally I consider winning the part of Dr. Eggman.
And was that month just totally worth it for you?
Absolutely. I mean, it got just a tiny bit tedious with like, okay, let's get this over with. Come on. I know I can do it. Why don't you know I can do it? But yeah, it was obviously worth all the effort. I'm glad it worked out in my favor. And I don't know who else was up against me for it, but there you go.
I hope they're listening. Anyway, going even further back in time, how did you break into the entertainment business? I can see from your resume that you did some theater shows like Arsenic and Old Lace and some dinner theater. So were you an actor first and then became a voice actor, or did you use another medium to break into the industry?
It was actually a confluence. I don't know I'm into big words today, but a confluence of two passions. I've always loved acting since I was a kid, and I would be acting in school productions from elementary school up through junior high and high school and college. and I also loved radio. I'd always listened to the radio as a kid, and then by high school, I was getting involved in the local college radio station. And then when I actually went to college, I was involved at the college radio station there, and then some part-time work at the local radio Syracuse, New York. And eventually, I was ended up doing a lot of production at the radio stations where I would do commercials and stuff and get to do wacky characters, and that was fun. And I was also doing community theater at the same time. And by the time I left upstate New York Radio Land and went down to a New York radio syndication outfit, I eventually put together enough of a demo tape that I was able to send it out for other freelance jobs. And I was looking in backstage at the theater newspaper just to see what was available for voice work. And one of the blind box ads that I responded to, and a blind box is when they don't tell you who it is because they want to keep it a secret, turned out to be 4Kids and Pokemon. And so I got the first Pokemon episode that I did, and then 4Kids ended up using me for the other stuff. Before that, actually, I got two other jobs from backstage. The first one, my first actual video work, was a little production called Little Tug's Big Adventure, which was a live-action film of boats on New York Harbor, telling a story of a little tugboat and his friends, and I played all the male voices. Mm-hmm. Look for that at your local garbage dumpster, perhaps. I hope the producers of that aren't listening.
I doubt it.
On my website, there's a link through to Amazon.com, and apparently is still for sale. Feel free to pick up a copy. And then the first anime work I did, which I guess made its way into being all the other animation stuff, was Demon Fighter Kocho for NYAV Post. And they've used me for a lot of other stuff since then, too.
Mm-hmm. So now you're in 4Kids, and you make your way all the way up to Sonic X, and then the Sonic X cast becomes the official cast of the Sonic games. So was Sonic the first video game voiceover you did?
Actually, no. The first video game was Ultimate Muscle. There were a couple of Ultimate Muscle video games first. And then Ultimate Muscle being a rather short-lived series, which is actually not entirely true. It ran for about the same amount of time as Sonic X did. It's just Sonic X has lived on because of the various Sonic games that continue to live on, which is helpful. So the first real recurring video game work, I guess, would be Sonic, but I'd also done Ultimate Muscle and Viva Pinata, and an upcoming game for the Wii that I can't talk about yet, but it'll be on the website when it's out.
Oh, so you have a secret Wii game in development right now.
Yeah, it was a quick little thing that I actually booked from one of the online audition sites that are becoming very popular. Someone said, "Hey, come do this." So, sure.
You heard it here, folks. Mike Pollock's going to be in a new game. We don't know what it is or when we're going to hear more about it, but he's in one. So anyway, back to the Sonic X series. You and the cast have done that show for about 70-plus episodes, and then you've done the games. So you guys must be a real close group of people. Tell us your relationship with Jason Griffith and the rest of the Sonic X cast.
It's actually kind of weird because since we all record separately, we don't always see each other all the time. Mostly we'll be passing people in the hall. You know, someone's coming in, someone's going out. Oh, hey, how are you? What you been up to? Hey, great, gotta go, see you later, bye. There are the occasional Christmas party, Halloween party, and they'll gather us all together. And not everyone shows up, but, you know, enough people show up to say, hey, how you doing? Great. Hey, look at you. Great. Like, you look great. Great. Fine. And actually, the time most of the cast of the shows get together, sadly, is the wrap party for a show. Because usually sometimes when a season wraps up, or usually when the show wraps its production entirely, there's a wrap party. You go out to a restaurant and have some fun. And then everyone shows up. And every once in a while, you say, that's who does that voice? Wow.
Well, since you bring it up, have you actually had one of those experiences when you do say, well, he does that voice?
It's a couple of the Viva Pinata people that showed up, like the voice of Fergie, who I'd always wanted to meet, because I said, hey, that's a great voice. I'd love to see who did that. And he walks in, and it's this big burly guy. I said, wow, that's impressive. Didn't expect that little voice to come out of that big guy.
That's classic. So now we've covered your rise to and work in voice acting. I was wondering if you could do some of your voices that won't get us in trouble if we air them.
I can do short snippets of voices without having a problem. Like say, I'm Dr. Eggman. And he's like, okay, I can get away with that. Or, I'm Melanie May, look at me. But, yeah, they tend to be protective, so I can't make the voices say nasty things and stuff. I hate that.
Of course. But have you developed any voices over the years that aren't protected by 4Kids or any other company that you'd like to share with us today?
Let me think for a second. I actually do impressions of some of my other voice actor friends, which I was going to say I haven't used them in any case, but actually yes, I have. I do some work dubbing Turkish films into English, and it turns out that one of the guys that I do impressions of is actually working on them as well, and which is interesting because I kind of developed one of my characters based around his voice. His name is Arthur Albert. He's a voice actor. He's an elderly gentleman, and he has an interesting sort of a cadence when he speaks. And I ended up doing a character voice based on his for a show, and little did I know that about a year or so later, he would come on and also do a voice in the same show as himself. And it was interesting because, of course, I was telling the people that were recording, this is the guy that I'm doing, and he's a funny guy. You should see him. And when they hired him, they said, hey, you know that voice you do? He's here now doing stuff. It's like, wow, that's great.
That's nice. So before we were rolling here, we were testing levels, and I had you say some things, and you were giving like a weather report like, it's 62 degrees in your area. And you mentioned your radio days. What role did you play back when you were working in radio?
In college life, I worked at the college radio station doing little odd jobs that were completely useless. But one day I went on a class tour of WSYR and Y94 FM in Syracuse, New York. And while everyone else was wanting to see the newsroom and the DJs and stuff, I wanted to see the production director because I had fun doing production, making commercials and stuff. And so I asked the production director, say, you taking interns? He said, sure, free labor, we'll take you. So I interned for about 9 months or so, typing index cards for the record library at the time. And then eventually they needed some part-time work, so I started doing overnight shifts on the local adult contemporary station under the assumed air name of Phil. And I had a small but loyal following, I guess. If you go to cnyradio.com, and actually I have a link there because it covers all of Central New York radio, and they're linking people who have passed through the area, and I said, oh, put me on. Sure, great. So yeah, I did overnights there as your typical, hey, 194 FM, it's Phil, and that's Elton John, and stuff like that. And then I moved over to their sister station, WSYR, targeting people much older than I was at the time, but I got to be a little more civilized in my delivery while still having my little wacky, wry sense of humor. And then I moved from there to a rock station in Rochester, New York, WCMF, where I was production director for just under a year until they determined I wasn't rock and roll enough. And then after that, I was toiling in the mostly anonymous world of radio syndication for the past almost 15 years.
Uh-huh. And for those who don't know, what is radio syndication?
We were doing the stuff, the prep material that made your local radio morning show guys sound good. They would be able to walk in and have stacks of stuff they could just read, like comedy bits and entertainment news and song parodies and stuff, and we would be the people hard at work creating that.
Oh, gotcha. So people like Bob and Tom?
Those kind of people, yeah. And they would just say, I'm too lazy to do this stuff myself. We'd rather get this material pre-done from you.
All right. So me as a film major, I'm very interested in this. Have you appeared on screen in anything else besides Little Tug's Big Adventure?
The only on-camera stuff I've done was in Syracuse. I was in a spot for the local cable company where I got to dress up like an ultra nerd and stroll along a beach and pick up women. I never even got a copy of that, though. I'm sure there's probably a copy somewhere floating around, but that's all I remember of it, was dressing up all dorky with my hair greased back and in high-water pants. Interestingly, in clothes all from my own wardrobe. And, yeah, that was fun. And a couple of people from the radio station at the time saw me on TV and said, "Hey, we saw you on TV, you little dorky guy, you."
All right, man. Well, I'd love to hear more, but I'm out of time today. Mike, thank you very much for coming out and talking to me today. The people at Sonic Stadium will surely enjoy listening to this one. So, yeah, thanks again, man.
Thanks, Brad.
All right, Mike, I'll get back at you. Maybe when the next game's out. All right, for all you listeners out there, for more interviews, Sonic news, articles, and community blog posts, why not keep visiting the #1 Sonic fan site in the world, the Sonic Stadium. I'm Brad Flick, and Dreadnux owes me a beer. Don't you, Svendy? I'll see you next time. Stay cool.